Hello constructors and delvers, Aaron here, back with another video. While most of the hype behind the 4.1 patch might be around the new characters, areas, and story, we can't forget about the new weapons coming up too. Here we have a new free-to-play weapon, 4 more gacha ones, and 2 new 5-star catalysts. But before we hop right into talking about the new weapons, their impact, and their worth, I just want to say that if you like my stuff, why not take a bite out of that French butter cookie flavored subscribe button down below. Also, for each weapon, I will have characters of that weapon's archetype next to it. As I talk about what the weapon provides, I will remove the characters that don't synergize with something the weapon offers. Okay, now let's move on to the meat of the video, starting off with the new free-to-play event weapon, the Ballad of Boundless Blue. This weapon comes with a high base attack and a low energy recharge stat. The passive increases normal attack damage percent by 8 to 16% and charged attack damage percent by 6 to 12% when the character wielding this weapon hits an enemy with a normal or charged attack. This passive can stack up to 3 times, and these stacks are not independent, which is a good thing. This catalyst would benefit characters that deal most of their damage through normal and or charged attacks, those that scale specifically with attack, and those that would enjoy a bit of energy recharge. So this weapon would be a great free-to-play option for the likes of Ningguang, Klee, Yanfei, Scaramouche, Reedsley, and Neuvillette. This weapon will prove to be these characters' best free-to-obtain weapon option even over Dodoko Tails due to the great amount of damage percent in most of their kit. Even characters like Klee and Ningguang, who deal a significant amount of damage with their skill and burst, end up benefiting much more from this weapon than Dodoko Tails due to the energy recharge substat, which will offer them more consistency. Then there's Yanfei, whose damage is almost entirely focused on her normal and charged attacks. On top of this, she really wants that energy recharge since her burst is charged attack stim, and all of her damage scales well with attack. This weapon is crazy good for Yanfei and proves to be her best free-to-play option available, and one of her best 4-star options overall, as it's just behind the Widsith by about 5%. However, I did mention that this is these characters' best free-to-obtain weapon and not free-to-play weapon. This is because this weapon is beat out by the new Flowing Purity on every Catalyst character except for Yanfei. So if you are using that on anyone other than Yanfei, keep it. Onto the gacha weapons, which all share a similar passive but with different stats. Before we talk about what each individual weapon does, I first want to talk about the functionality of these weapons' passives, as they are functionally flawed. The passive for this weapon series grants a stack to the wielder if they heal or are healed up to a max of 3 stacks, with each stack lasting 30 seconds. These stacks can also be obtained while the user is off field, which is important. Once per 15 seconds after the wielder uses an elemental skill or burst, they are granted the actual weapon's passive effect for 10 seconds, buffing the living hell out of them. The main issue with this passive is the healing aspect. In most situations, at the start of a fight, a character will not have lost health and they will activate their skill and burst immediately. Since the passive does not state that it takes into account overhealing, the wielder of these weapons needs to be less than max health to get the buff. They also need to be healed 3 separate times before they even get on field or use their skill or burst in order to get max stacks for this buff. However, most heals usually only heal on field and have a tick rate of once per 2 seconds, meaning that you'd have to be on field for about 6 seconds while getting smacked around for casting a skill or burst to use this effect. Since most characters start off their rotation by using a skill or burst, they'll usually have either 0 or 1 stacks of this weapon's passive on the first rotation. This is horrendous since half of an abyss floor should only take up to 5 rotations, so the weapon's uptime will be anywhere between 0 to 80%. In order to get full 100% uptime, you'd have to have a character that decreases off-field characters' current HP while also having another character with a team-wide heal over time. So not only do the weapons have to offer specific stats for a character to scale with like every other weapon does, but these ones also force you to use undesirable and risky team rotations or a very specific team comp that's not even in the game yet. However, as long as there is a healer on the team, the passive effect can be pretty easily stacked after a first rotation. So depending on the stats, these weapons can still be good. But what stats do these weapons actually offer? Do their stats make up for their extremely situational passive effect? Let's start with the new sword, the Dockhand's Assistant. This weapon offers an average attack and HP percent substat. This passive effect increases the user's elemental mastery by 40 to 80 per stack and grants the user 2 to 4 energy per stack. This passive will grant a total of 120 to 240 elemental mastery and 6 to 12 energy to the user if they obtain max stacks. Some great users of this weapon are those sword users that really want that massive amount of elemental mastery in the passive, since this is now the largest amount of EM on any sword. Characters like this would be Alhaitham, Kazuha, and Lynette. Since this weapon offers a bit more energy to the user, this can prove to be a very powerful upgrade for consistency too. However, since this weapon's passive is so hard to consistently proc, using the other elemental mastery weapons or Favoni's sword will prove to be better, especially on the first rotation. Next up are those that want the HP percent substat like Ikiki and Layla. These two will end up with much larger shields and will perform much better as shield bots if you need that. However, in terms of utility and consistency, Favoni's sword will still be these two characters' best in slot weapons. And finally, there's Kuki Shinobu, who can heal others, and Nilo, who is constantly taking damage and needs constant healing. Nilo here is the obvious winner, as her own damage and her team's damage output scales directly with her HP, while the Elemental Mastery will directly scale with her personal damage. But is this better than her other options? In terms of her own personal bountiful core damage output, this weapon is her second best when the passive is activated at all refinements. Because this weapon offers the second highest HP stat of all swords, this stat stick will allow her to buff her team's bountiful core damage output by a tremendous amount. It's so much so that the damage increase of a single ally will be almost triple the amount of bountiful core damage that Nilo lost. This means that not only can this weapon lead to Nilo's second largest personal bountiful core damage output if this passive is stacked, but it also will lead to her team's second highest damage output at all times. But what about Kuki? Can the same be said for her too? Well, with the passive up, this weapon does outperform most other options starting at Refinement 3. However, that's only with the passive up, as without it, this weapon just cannot compete. Additionally, when we consider the fact that this passive won't be up on the first rotation, this weapon at Refinement 5 outscales other 4-star Elemental Mastery weapons only after 4 full team rotations, which is toward the max of when you should have cleared half of an Abyss floor. Sometimes you may not even reach 4 rotations, which would make this weapon worse than the likes of the Iron Sting or even the Dark Iron Sword. Despite this, it does still grant her HP percent, which contributes directly to her healing, making this sword a good stable option in case you want some more healing while not sacrificing too much damage. Next is the Portable Power Saw, since it's incredibly similar to the Dockhand's assistant. This claymore comes with a low base attack and high HP substat. On top of this, it has the same Elemental Mastery and Energy Regen passive effect as the Dockhand's assistant. Two characters that could work well with this weapon are Dori and Dea, as they scale decently with the high HP substat. They would both benefit from the Elemental Mastery buff, and they need a lot of energy to burst consistently, since its measly 12 energy generation barely helps. Instead, Favoni's Greatsword will still prove to be better for these two, as it will make them much more consistent, especially on the first rotation. On top of this, while they do have HP scaling, it's not great HP scaling, and is there for defense rather than offense. Razor is another character who could utilize this weapon pretty effectively in his Curry team, where he will constantly take damage and constantly heal. The HP will make him tankier, the energy generation will help keep his burst up, and the Elemental Mastery this weapon grants is the best you can ask for. However, you will be sacrificing the team's energy generation when switching to this weapon from Favoni's Greatsword, which would end up hurting his team, but it does end up competing with Fav for his best in slot in these comps. While it may seem like there's no one that suits this weapon well, there is one character who shows great potential when these two are paired together, and that's Kaveh. Kaveh is an on-field bloom enabler and buffing support. While doing his job, he's constantly taking damage and healing himself based on his Elemental Mastery. Some of his biggest issues are his energy generation and his own tankiness, which this weapon helps alleviate. On top of this, his constant healing can proc the massive Elemental Mastery buff for himself to damage and heal with. In most situations, this will be Kaveh's best in slot weapon, though Favoni's will be better if the energy requirements for the team are high. Up next, we have the Polearm Prospector's Drill and the Bow Range Gauge, which share the exact same stats and passive. Their passives are shared with the last two weapons, but these grant 3% to 7% attack and 7% to 13% elemental damage bonus per stack, up to a max of 12% to 21% attack and 21% to 39% elemental damage bonus. Let's start these two off with the Prospector's Drill. The stat lineup this weapon offers is actually pretty good, as it can be used by a good amount of characters. However, the catch. Now that we culled some of these babies, let's take out those that don't make much use of attack and would benefit much more from other free-to-play weapons like Dragon's Bane and the White Tassel. So we're left off with Shenhe and Xiao. Shenhe is a bit complicated, so we'll start with her. Shen has no great means of proccing the passive effect effectively, and would never be able to actually use the passive until rotation 2, if she can use it at all. So at base, it's worse than other options. This weapon also has some fierce competition in the other gacha weapon, the Wavebreaker's Fin, which offers the highest base attack possible on the 4-star, it offers an attack percent subset, and it offers a pure passive burst damage percent boost based on the total energy amount in the team, averaging at around 35 to 70%. This is incredibly strong, but Prospector's Drill has the potential to offer an insane amount of attack percent to the point where it can grant Shenhe more attack than Wavebreaker's Fin. This will not only increase Shenhe's own damage output, but it will also increase her DPS's damage too. So while the damage percent she gets from Prospectors is worse, when it's fully stacked, it will still increase her damage over Wavebreakers by 0.5% and will increase her allies' damage by 0.2%. This is practically nothing, and it gets even worse when we consider the fact that she has a hard time stacking the passive. This is such an issue that if she goes only the first rotation without max stacks, it will take her about 22 full team rotations to merely match Wavebreaker's Fin. However, most use Favonius Lance on Shenhe due to it being her conditional best-in-slot weapon despite it being a 4-star. Favonius Lance offers so much more damage to the rest of the team that her team will end up outputting more damage than even that of her signature weapon. While the total damage output is not higher than her signature due to the personal damage decrease Shenhe receives, it is still 2.5% better than that of a max stack refinement 5 Prospector's Drill. What about Zhao though? Unlike Shenhe, he can easily max out the passive effect if he just waits a plunge or two before using his second skill cast. This weapon also gives him a crap ton of attack, which he really needs. It's so much so that this weapon will be about on par with the Battle Pass weapon, the Deathmatch. However, it is a 4-star limited gacha weapon, and his signature is on the standard banner. This weapon also forces you to use an odd rotation that can be detrimental to Zhao's energy generation. So with these two things in mind, I still wouldn't say you should ever go for the Prospector's Drill if you're specifically looking for a weapon for Zhao. Onto the range Guage, which is the bow version of Prospector's Drill. This weapon is best used on characters that want a crap ton of attack. However, the issue with this weapon this time is that most bow characters are off-field and won't want to or can't take a lot of damage to get healed. It's so much so that only 2 characters can actually use this weapon to some sort of effectiveness, Lenny and Tartaglia. However, for these 2, there's also the Song of Stillness, which offers slightly less attack and damage percent, but with a much more consistent passive condition of only 1 heal, and it can be procced at any point. In a good amount of cases, the Song of Stillness will usually be neck and neck with this new gacha weapon. On average, when putting him in a Burgeon team, range Guage will only be better on Tartaglia once at Refinement 3+, after 4 rotations. However, it will almost never exceed Song of Stillness's damage increase on Lenny due to his inability to consistently get max stacks, though he can get 2 with some ease. In terms of strength, this weapon series is one of the weakest that Hoyoverse has put in the game since launch. They are extremely conditional, they're Keem top restrictive, and they only offer some decent bonuses. All of these things combined restrict their users and the weapon's damage output so much that they are comparable to free-to-play options while being 3 times as limiting. The only weapon I can recommend here would be a Refinement 1 Dockhand's assistant for all the free-to-play Nilos out there, since she's the only one that gets any major upgrade. Everyone else still has the Favonius weapon series or other free-to-play options that perform between slightly worse to better than these new gacha ones. Hopefully the 5 stars are better, right? Let's start with the Tome of Eternal Flow, previously named the Rite of Eternal Flow. This weapon offers a low base attack with a high crit damage substat. The passive effect of this catalyst increases HP by 16 to 32% and also increases charged attack damage by 14 to 30% every time the wielder's current HP changes up to a max of 3 times or up to 42 to 90%. Additionally, when reaching the max charge attack bonus, the wielder will restore 8 to 12 energy back to themselves. For most characters, the base stats is all this weapon offers, making it about as valuable as a Lost Prayer is for them. But this weapon can be pretty decent for those select few whose charge attacks take up a good portion of their overall damage output. The main issue is that most Catalyst characters run into issues when trying to get them to take any sort of damage due to their extremely low health pools. While the HP percent will help mitigate this, forcing a Catalyst character to take damage will still usually put them into one-shot range of certain enemies. Main DPS Catalyst characters also usually want to use shields due to this HP issue, plus the fact that they don't usually have good innate interruption resistance. With this in mind, the only characters that would actually benefit somewhat from this weapon are Yan Fei, where it will be her second best in slot weapon when she can consistently proc the passive, Riesli since he can proc the passive easily and a decent portion of his damage output is from charged attacks, and most importantly, Nuvilette. However, due to the infeasibility of proccing the passive consistently and due to the very niche buff it grants, the weapon ends up being just a crit damage stat stick in most situations. If there was a consistent team-wide health reduction mechanic in the game, this weapon would become a lot better and would be one of the better options for all main DPS Catalyst characters. Though, if there was a consistent team-wide health reduction mechanic in the game, the next weapon, Cashflow Supervision, would become much stronger than this one could ever hope to. This weapon is Riesli's signature and offers both a high base attack plus a low crit rate value. Its passive increases the wielder's attack by 16 to 32%. When the current health of the wielder changes, they are granted a 16 to 32% normal attack damage bonus and 14 to 28% charge attack damage bonus up to 3 times, or at 48% to 96% normal attack damage bonus and 42% to 90% charge attack damage bonus. Additionally, once at max stacks, the wielder gains an 8 to 16% attack speed bonus. This weapon is just a superior version version of Tome of Eternal Flow, since most main DPS characters scale with the massive attack bonus that Cashflow provides. On top of this, it still grants crit while also providing almost the same charge attack damage bonus as Tome. Tome might come with HP percent and some flat energy, but Cashflow comes with even more damage in the normal attack damage bonus and the extra attack speed. This weapon is so good that it will be on par with the Widsith in terms of DPS at worst, or a top pick for Catalyst main DPS units at best. If there is ever a way to decrease the team's health consistently, this weapon will instantly become the best main DPS Catalyst in the game. It's that good. This patch definitely seems like a Catalyst player's wet dream. On top of getting 2 new Catalyst characters, all of the best weapons in this patch are Catalyst. Y'all are feasting, but everyone else, spamming. Anyway, what do you all think of the weapons? You excited for something specific? Do you think I'm wrong on anything? Are you pulling for the new Gacha ones or any 5-star? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that, I will skedaddle. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!